Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the comments that I received in the chat room during the last hangout. I took some notes. And also, I'm going to respond to some of the comments that people actually left on the video right now. And for those of you who are new to this particular video, this is a follow up to my last video about Robert Perkins. Robert Perkins posted something on Instagram basically downplaying the significance of the vote. And when I get a chance, I'm going to post the link to his Instagram post in both this video and in my last video so you all can just read it for yourself, read the commentary for yourself, and judge it for yourself. But basically, this is what he said to summarize his comments from before. Just bear with me a second. Let me go through my notes. Um, Basically, he had a picture of Khalid Muhammad, the leader in the Nation of Islam years ago. He was one of the leaders in the Nation of Islam. He later went on to join up with the new Black Panther Party. But there's a picture of Khalid Muhammad basically looking irritated or, perturbed or pissed off. And this guy, Robert Perkins, created a caption that basically said that this is how he looks when black people claim that voting is the only way to change the system. And then he basically went on to comment about how voting is not the end all be all. And, he basically talked about how voting doesn't get rid of corruption and it's not really that significant. I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. Go ahead and read his Instagram yourself so that you could know exactly what he said. But basically, when you boil it down to his essence, it's another example of him downplaying the importance of elections, basically suggesting that elections don't matter, your vote doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah. So I did my last video response to him. As I told him, I would do a video response to what he had to say, and that's what I did. And last time, earlier today, I did a live stream, providing that response. But I didn't have time to respond to the chat room because I had somewhere to go. I had to go to this reception. So what I want to do now is I want to go through some of the comments. I took down some notes from what you all were saying in the chat room. I'm going to respond to those comments, and then I'm also going to respond to the comments that were left under the video. And then I'm going to close this out. So if you all could just bear with me a second. I'm going to go through these comments. So if I'm not mistaken, Psycho was talking about how he supports the idea of black people holding our vote hostage until our issues are addressed, basically saying, well, we shouldn't vote for a particular candidate until they address our issues, or we shouldn't vote, period, until our issues are addressed. And really, I don't think that that's the way, you affect change. That's not the way that you get politicians to vote in favor of your positions, or that's not the way that you get commitments from politicians simply by saying, well, I'm going to hold my vote hostage or whatever. I mean, I think that what happens when people decide not to vote, at that point, like, basically, the parties don't take you seriously. Like, the political parties, the only time political parties and candidates go to certain communities is because that they know that those communities vote. They know that, like, for instance, the reason why a lot of those politicians go to churches, the reason why they go to civil rights conventions like Urban League or National Action Network or even Rainbow Push, the reason why they go to those conventions is because they know that those constituents, those members actually vote in elections. So they go out of their way to show them that they support them, that they stand with them and all that kind of stuff. And they only do that because they know that those groups of people actually vote. If you don't vote, you don't count. They're not campaigning to groups of people that don't actually vote because that's a waste of their time. So I don't think just withholding the vote alone is going to change anything. But I do believe that we need to have an agenda. And there are plenty of African American groups that actually put together agendas. There are groups that hold conventions where the main purpose of their convention is to establish their particular agenda. And what those groups do is they often will judge politicians based on their adherence to their particular agenda. So I think that too often what happens is we make these generalizations that aren't backed up with actual facts, because there are plenty of black groups that actually have political agendas and actually hold politicians accountable for their response to that political agenda. So I think that what has to happen is before we even select a candidate, we need to tell them what our positions are on the issue and demand that they support those positions, just like any other group does, just like the pro-Israeli lobby like AIPAC. They have a set of issues and agenda items that they demand that politicians adhere to before they vote for them, just like the NRA does, just like the gay groups do and the immigrant groups do, just like any other lobbying group, whether we're talking about women or we're talking about Arabs, for instance, all these different interest groups. What they do is they have their agenda and they demand that politicians adhere to their agenda. And based on those politicians' adherence to the agenda, they decide to put their vote behind certain politicians. The same is true for labor unions, etc. So this is not, rocket science or anything like that. This is something that black people can easily do. And it's something that many black people already do. Now, someone also mentioned that we have a problem of blindly following parties and stuff like that. For instance, overwhelming majority of black people vote for the Democratic Party, and some people just vote party lines without even doing any kind of critical thinking or critical analysis, and that's deeply problematic. We need to move beyond that point. We need to get to the point where we're all about what that politician stands for, what that politician's positions are on the issues, instead of voting based on what party they belong to. Now, let's be clear. I mean, the Republican Party doesn't offer a damn thing to black people. So the black people have no incentive at all to vote for the Republican Party. It's a party that's openly hostile to the interests of black people. It is a party that panders to white supremacists. All you have to do is study the Southern strategy and you will understand what I'm talking about. All you have to do is go on YouTube and search for Lee Atwater and the Southern strategy, and you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. Voting for the Republican Party is not a realistic option or a beneficial option to the black community. So that's part of the reason why so many of our people vote for Democrats. Now, I do believe that we need to look at other options, third-party options as well. We need to put pressure on these parties to support our agenda, pressure on the Democrats as well. We need to apply pressure because too often they take us for granted. Too often we support politicians for the wrong reasons. We support them because they went to some church and kissed some babies and all that kind of stuff, instead of supporting them based on their agenda. Like, you have all these black people supporting Bill Clinton, even though this guy has done things that are adverse to the interests of black people, like welfare reform, like the crime bill. Policies that have had a devastating effect on black communities. So, so we just have to, take all those things into account, when we're deciding which party we're going to support. I'm going to have to run and get my charger. I'll be right back. Yeah, because I don't want this power to go out while I'm doing this live stream. So this is going to be, I'm going to have to hold this up for a second. But yeah, so that's a real issue. I think that that's a valid point about blindly supporting a party. I don't think we should blindly support any political party. I think we need to be about whether or not that party supports us. That should be the determining factor about whether or not we're going to support that party. And this is nothing new. I mean, the Zionists do that. You know, if a candidate doesn't support their agenda, then they run other candidates against them. The same is true for the NRA. If a candidate doesn't support them, they run candidates against them. All right, so let me just go through your comments a little bit before I move on, because last time I didn't get a chance to look at the comments. Shout out to Orlando Q. Shout out to Information Man Show. Shout out to Nikki Justice. Yeah, so also, like somebody said, like, well, they think that, you know, a lot of people believe that elections are fixed. You know, I understand, you know, that people have that assertion, but if you're going to make that assertion, you need to come with actual facts to prove that point. That's what you need to do. Now, somebody else talked about how if a politician doesn't support reparations, then they can't vote for that politician. Now, I understand like that reparations is a very important issue. That's very important to me. I support reparations, and I believe that candidates should support reparations, and that is an item on my list of things that politicians should support. But I'm not going to decide, well, I'm not going to support a candidate just based on that sole issue, that one issue, when there are a host of other issues that I support the candidate on, especially when I see that they have an adversary or an opponent that's far worse than they are, that's going to be more devastating to the black community. Um, so I'm not a one issue type of voter, you know, unless it's like something that has an immediate impact on our community. Like, if, for instance, a politician is against affirmative action, or a politician supports voter suppression, things like that. But reparations, I think that that is an issue that we need to demand that politicians support. We should demand them that they support that. But I'm not going to use that as a sole criteria to say, well, I'm not going to vote for you based on your position on that, when I see that they support other positions that are beneficial to the black community. Like, for instance, Bernie Sanders didn't support reparations. I don't know if he's changed his position, but I know that he's progressive on a lot of other issues that are important to the black community. So I wouldn't write him off based solely on the reparations issue. When I see that he supports black people on other important matters, when I see like his legacy, his history of being on the front lines in the fight for civil rights in this country. So that's just an example. So I don't decide, you know, who I'm going to vote for based solely on that issue of reparations, though that is an important issue. Now, another point that I want to address is this point that Back to Love made in the chat room. He said black people have been marching for 150 years and haven't moved an inch. I mean, when I hear stuff like that, man, I'm just like, are you for real? I mean, are you serious? You can't be serious. 150 years ago, we were in shackles. 150 years ago, we didn't have any rights at all in this country. We had no rights that the white man was bound to respect or acknowledge, as was written in that Dred Scott decision. We didn't have any rights. We were property in this country. We were shackled. We were beaten. We were raped. We were castrated. And it was okay in this society. We didn't get compensation for our labor. We were enslaved, working from sun up to sundown, you know, having our families ripped apart, treated worse than animals. That's what we were, how we were living 150 years ago. So to say that we haven't moved an inch is to just outright lie, because we're not living like that nowadays. So we got to move away from these exaggerations and outright distortions and falsehoods. because we have moved so far away from that state of slavery. You can't even say that we haven't moved an inch, because that's just absolutely false. And frankly, just asinine to suggest that we haven't made progress. And even beyond slavery, we look at the Jim Crow era where black people could be lynched in large numbers publicly, where they would have public spectacles with black people hanging from trees and people were entertained by that stuff. Black people burned at the stake and people were entertained by that stuff. Black people openly killed by lynch mobs and no justice anywhere in sight. Congress wouldn't even pass a law making lynching a federal crime, and they still haven't done so today. But it was okay back then for black people to be lynched. It was okay for lynch mobs to run up in Emmett Till's house and take him out and lynch that brother, and everybody knows who's responsible for it, and these people get away with it. That was okay back then because we didn't have the same rights we have today. Although you have the issue of police brutality, which is horrible, that can't be, when you look at the numbers of black people who were lynched, openly lynched, where they knew who was responsible, where the killers were actually on photos killing black people, regular citizens doing this stuff, and no justice rendered, you can't compare that to where we are today. You don't see lynch mobs stringing black people up in the street or burning black people in the street publicly and no justice being rendered. You don't see that stuff going on nowadays. So to say that we haven't moved an inch is ridiculous. It's just outright false to say that. When you look at the sheer numbers, of course, police brutality is a form of lynching, but the numbers are different. The numbers are completely different. Back then it wasn't just the police, it was regular citizens that could lynch your black ass with no justice in sight. That doesn't happen today. We're not still forced to sit in the back of the bus today. We're not forced to drink from the colored fountain. We're not forced to eat in the back of the restaurant or not allowed to eat at lunch counters or forced not to eat, swim in certain swimming pools. Forced to go to the most horrible schools with zero resources at all. Although there are some problems with the education system, it is not what it was. And that's going to bring me to another comment that I'm going to respond to in the comment section. There was a time when black people could not vote in this country. It did not matter. Why did these people go out of their way to prevent us from voting? They used to have literacy tests for black people when we wanted to vote. They would test you. They would make up impossible tests so that it would be impossible for you to pass the test. They would tax you in order to be able to vote. They made it as difficult as possible. We no longer have to face those kind of barriers to the vote. Of course, they're doing, voter suppression and this and that, but that pales in comparison to what was done to our ancestors before. You could be shot for trying to vote back in the day. You were terrorized back in the day. Again, that's another reminder of how important our vote is and was. Again, if our vote wasn't valuable, they would not be lynching black people for trying to exercise their right to vote. They wouldn't have killed those 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi if our vote didn't matter. So, for people to say there has been no progress, we've been marching for 150 years and there's no progress. All you got to do is look at the Civil Rights Act. All you have to do is look at the Voting Rights Act. All you have to do is look at all these civil rights laws that have been passed as a result of black people marching as a result of electoral politics. And you will understand that we have moved more than an inch. Now, you could say, well, there hasn't been enough progress. I get that. I agree with that. There needs to be more. There's much more that needs to be done. But to suggest that we haven't moved an inch is ridiculous. There was a time when we couldn't even vote, and now today we have congressmen, we have senators, we have people that were governors that became governors. We have black people that are viable candidates to become governors in this country. You can't say we haven't moved an inch when we got black millionaires and billionaires. You can't say that. You can't say we haven't moved an inch when we got black senators and black presidents. I mean, people got to move beyond these ridiculous rhetorical statements that aren't rooted in reality, man. So let me go through these comments before I move on to the comments to the video. Yeah, I mean, I hear y'all about this lesser of two evils, man. I really do hear you about that, and I think that that's why primaries are so important. And for years I was I was a independent, but that prevented me from voting in these primaries. The primaries are where you can really make a difference. You can decide who's going to be the candidate for your particular party. So you don't end up with a lesser of two evils situation. And I'm not saying you got to vote for Democrats or, obviously I'm saying you not to vote for Republicans. I can't stand the Republican Party and what it represents. But we don't have to settle for the Democrats. When I talk about the right to vote and exercising your right to vote, I'm not saying vote for these Democrats. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying exercise your right to vote, whether that's voting for a third party candidate or a Democrat or somebody else. Don't squander that right to vote. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to settle for the lesser of two evils. Yeah, so Elaine Lloyd, shout out to everybody in the chat room. Shout out to Jalen TV Podcast. Shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Shout out to Nikki Justice. Um, but yeah, so Elaine Lloyd said people are always saying things like we haven't made progress. I think that is playing the victim. Yeah, I mean, some people love to be victims, man. They love victimhood. They embrace that. They love being powerless. They love that. So they want to pretend like there's been no progress. There's nothing we can do. We're done, basically. And I think that that's a subservient type of posture to have, a weak posture. Oh, I see that Jalen said it's buffering. Oh man, this is buffering. Hopefully, some of it will come out. I understand that happened before. Um, yeah, I think Sprint slows down. I mean, they said that they slow down my connection and stuff because I use a lot of data or whatever. So maybe that's the problem. But I'm just gonna power through this. Hopefully y'all can hear most of it. I know the last one there was a couple of little segments that were choppy a little bit. Um, yeah, I hear people talk about separation, and I did a whole video on that called "Black Separatism is a Fantasy." So I encourage y'all to check that out. I don't have a problem with black nationalism, with black people doing for self, but I think that too often, instead of coming up with a practical plan, all we have is rhetoric. And then at the end of the day, instead of trying to do anything to affect change, people people simply perpetuate this rhetoric about separation. So if y'all haven't seen that video, all you have to do is search for it, New Possibilities. Black separatism is a fantasy. It's a rather long video, but it's deep. I mean, it goes deep into the subject matter. So I encourage y'all to check that out. Yeah, voting rights are, yeah, they are still under attack, no doubt. Pro woman, Jay, you're right about that. They are still under attack. There are efforts to suppress black voters. We saw what happened in Shelby County versus Holder, where Section 4 of the Voting Act was, basically ripped out of the act, and now it's more difficult to bring voter rights claims and stuff because of that. So we see a constant attack. We see efforts to suppress black voters, through voter ID requirements, through elimination of early voting and same day registration. So yeah, I mean that's a valid point, but it's not to the degree that it was before. I mean, black people risked their lives trying to vote back in the day. And the sad thing is, even though black people faced that kind of danger trying to vote, it seems like black people were more willing to do what was necessary to vote than they are today. Here we have the right to vote, but yet you have people promoting black apathy, basically telling you and me not to vote after our ancestors and elders fought and died and bled for that right to vote. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna go into like all that stuff about why we can't have our own system and black separatism, and I think that if I get into that, it'll take the conversation off on on a tangent, and it'll but excuse me, I've addressed that in prior videos. This whole issue of separatism. I encourage y'all to check out those videos. When I get a chance, I'll post links in the cards so that way you don't have to search on YouTube for it. So Axel Foley said, I don't agree with everything New Possibility says all the time, but the brother is not over the top with the nonsense. He's balanced on many things. I appreciate that. I mean, we're not gonna always agree. Like, most people, there's gonna be a point of disagreement on my content. Like, I'm sure, like a lot of people ride with me on some issues, and then on other issues they may, part company with me, and that's cool. I mean, we're not gonna agree on everything. But this voting issue is so important to me, man, because it's like, because of this voter apathy, we ended up with a man like Donald Trump. And we face the prospect of this man appointing more and more Supreme Court justices, which will affect our civil rights. So this is not a joke. This is not a game. This is serious. Yeah, I mean, you're correct. We are victims, big game, you're right. We are victims of racism and all that kind of stuff. But we have to overcome our victimhood, man. We have to, instead of wallowing in victimhood, we need to be thinking about how can we change the situation. Instead of just like I said earlier, quoting the chairman of the NAACP, like, we need to go beyond just agonizing over things, and we need to start organizing, man. But too often, some of us have a defeatist mindset where we think we're powerless, where we think that there's nothing that we can do, that we're helpless. And we wallow, some of us wallow in victimhood. They say, well, the white man controls everything, so our vote doesn't count, and all that kind of stuff. Shout out to Miss Legit. I know you don't agree with nothing I'm saying. I know you don't agree with anything I'm saying because we've had these discussions before. Oh man. So Minor asked like what post happened. Like I'm talking about like I'm responding to something that when I get a chance I'll post a link in the description box so that y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. So Axel Foley said Perkins wasn't pro-black until after Trayvon Martin was killed. Yeah, I followed him for a while. Yeah, he wasn't really talking that political stuff back in the day. Like, but he was. I mean, he was cool. I like his channel. You know what I'm saying? Like, I followed him for a while. Um, so I don't have any. Yeah, this is not personal or anything like that. I just disagree with him on this voting issue. You know, there's a lot of things I agree with him on. Yeah, I'm tempted to address that separation issue, but I'm not going to touch on that right now because that's going to take the conversation way off course, and I'm going to end up talking all night. Um, and I think that my whole thing, I'll just say this about this separatism thing. You know, most of these people talking about separatism don't have any real plan to make it happen. So in the meantime, they're just talking about a fantasy without like actually doing anything to address our current day conditions. And by separatism, I'm talking about people saying that we need to have our own nation, not people that are saying that we need to control the businesses in our community and all that kind of stuff. I don't have any problem with us controlling the businesses in our community and having, you know, flourishing independent communities like Black Wall Street. That's not what I'm opposing. Yeah, so Axel Foley said Perkins' old videos were much better. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, Miss Legit asked, "Do I think that black voter apathy got Trump elected?" No, I don't put all the burden on black people. You know, obviously, a lot of white people went out and voted for this man. You know, and that's the main reason why he won because you had a lot of white backlash against Obama. A lot of people were angry that we had a black president in the White House, and they came out in large numbers to vote for Donald Trump, who represented the opposite of Obama. So I think that that's the main reason why Trump was elected. But you can't downplay the significance of the black vote, like in places like Michigan and even Wisconsin. You know, anytime you had the voter turnout in the black community was low. And I think that if we had a higher voter turnout, then it could have made a difference in this election. So I don't blame the situation solely on black people, but I do believe that if we came out in bigger numbers and voted against Donald Trump, then it's possible that he wouldn't be president today. That's all I'm saying. Well, thanks, Axel Foley, for your comments about my channel. I appreciate it. Oh, so Miss Legit says she actually does agree with some of the stuff I'm saying. She says I actually think voting is important, especially locally. Minor said, I never curse. I do, I mean, from time to time, like in my my video about Donald Trump, I went off, but I try not to do it so much. But there are times when I do start cursing and stuff. So, so y'all gotta bear with me. But I'm trying to keep it clean. I want to have my videos so that anybody can hear them. Like you could listen to them with your kids around and stuff like that. Because there's been times where I like certain YouTubers, like I like to listen to them. I'm entertained by them, and sometimes I'm educated by them. But I can't hardly play them around my children, my daughter, man. Like I'm playing, every other word is some curse word, so I got to cut them off. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to clean up. I mean, usually my videos don't have much profanity in them, but sometimes I get amped up and I do sometimes use profanity, but I'm trying to, make sure I try not to do that. But thanks for your compliment, Minor. All right, y'all, just bear with me. Yeah, so Big Game said voter turnout is going to continue to be low for Democrats until they start addressing black issues. Um, Yeah, I mean it's part. I mean, I think that they do like some of the Democrats do address issues that are relevant to Black people, but it's also about the candidates. Like, what kind of candidates do you have? Do you have candidates that are exciting, that are fresh, that are offering something new? Candidates that inspire people. That's what makes a difference. But if you have like these bland, run of the mill candidates, you're not going to have a large voter turnout, unfortunately. Oh, thanks, Minor. You said I'm one of your favorite woke YouTubers. I appreciate that. I can't believe you asked that question, Pro Woman J. There's no way in hell I would work for Donald Trump. I don't care how much money he paid. I know all those people that work for him probably hate working for him, especially that Sarah Sanders. I mean, that lady Sanders. I mean, I'm sure she gets tired of trying to explain away Trump's BS, man. Trump's nonsense. I'm sure all those people can't stand working for him. Oh man, he says it's choppy as hell. I'm gonna have to listen to the playback, man, because it says it's live. I didn't get any messages saying that it's buffering. So, all right, I'm just gonna go through these last comments. It can't be that choppy. It's probably a little bit choppy, but maybe it's your maybe it's your phone, man. Maybe your phone is choppy because you're the only one complaining about it. But if y'all could let me know if he's correct, I would appreciate it. At least that first one wasn't too bad. So depending on how bad this is. Oh, somebody said yeah, it's super choppy. Oh man, that's messed up. Elaine said it's cool on her end. All right, so I'm gonna have to see what happened. I'll find out when I listen to it in the morning sometime. If it's too bad, I'm just gonna have to delete it. All right, so let me look at these comments real quick. So, in the comment section, S. Wise, to my last video on this subject, S. Wiseman said, I say black people were better educated when we were separate. All right, let's see. Oh, so I'm choppy. All right, I'll see how this comes out when I play it back. But in the meantime, I'm just gonna roll with it. So, basically, S. Wiseman was saying that black people were better educated when we were separate. And my response to that is like, we, I don't think we were better educated because first of all, you had less educated black people. You had less doctors, lawyers, um, other professionals back then because we didn't have an opportunity to get a higher education. So I don't think that we were better educated, man. How are we better educated when when large percentages of black people were in poverty compared to the poverty rate today? When there were less educated black people back then than there are now. So I don't think that that's a strong argument at all. Let's see. And S. Wiseman also said that voting encourages apathy. And, you know, I don't, I think that it can encourage, like for some people, it can encourage apathy if they think that all they need to do is vote and that's all they need to do to create a difference in society. I think that that can promote apathy. But, you know, voting is a part of somebody's civic responsibility, man. That's just one piece of it, as I said in the prior video. So, I don't think that it's apathetic to exercise your right to vote. I think what's apathetic is to whine and cry and complain on YouTube about the conditions of our people without trying to organize our people, to whine and complain about politicians doing X, Y, and Z and not actually trying to take out time to actually vote for politicians. So, and then also she said that she also said that it's a game and it's an illusion of choice. The Democrats and Republicans are the same. They're not the same. All you have to do is look at the issues. And as I pointed out in my prior video, I talked about the differences between the Obama administration and Trump's administration. It's a night and day difference on so many levels, and that alone proves that there's a difference between Republicans and Democrats. When we look at issues like police brutality and the Trump administration's approach to it versus Obama's approach, when we look at the issue of poverty, you got Trump basically saying that there's no need for a war on poverty because that war is won, and we got all these disproportionate numbers of poor black people. So, yeah, I mean there are clear differences. I mean when you look at healthcare, the issue of healthcare, you got the Trump administration trying to do away with the Affordable Care Act, and you have these Republicans in these different states trying to limit and undermine the Affordable Care Act. So there are differences. When you look at affirmative action, there are differences on their positions. So to suggest that these two parties are the same is just wrong. It's just not factual. And you do, in fact, have a choice. Even if you don't go with the two major parties, you still have third party candidates that you can choose from. just like I did during the presidential election after Bernie Sanders lost the Democratic primary. I voted for a third party candidate. You always have a choice. It's about you exercising that choice. Okay, so I'm just about done. Yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to respond to your comments. That's why I did this live stream. Third party candidates do sometimes win. It's virtually impossible for them to win presidential elections at this point. It's very difficult for them to win those. But on the local level, they can win. When you look at a Bernie Sanders, he is a independent. Even though he ran in the Democratic primary, for years he's an independent, and he's in the U.S. Senate. So it can happen. It's just about the people organizing their energy behind these third party candidates. They can win. It's just up to us to make it happen. So, yeah, so let me look through your comments before I close out. Man, I hope this isn't super choppy. It probably is choppy since a couple of people have been complaining. But we'll see. If it's too bad, I'm going to just delete it. But it's always worth it to talk to y'all or to at least see your comments. Negro wireless. That's funny. Why is it that something that's associated with black has to be bad, man? Yeah, I mean, there were some. I mean, obviously, there was some educated black people. I mean, like you had people like Clarence Mitchell, who helped push a lot of that civil rights legislation. Educated. You had people like Thurgood Marshall, an educated attorney, very, one of the best attorneys at the time. So you did have educated black people. They just didn't. We didn't have the same numbers that we have today. I mean, you had people like W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, somebody that was like that went to one of these Ivy League schools back during segregation times. I mean, you had Charles Hamilton Houston. I mean, the list goes on and on of a lot of educated black people that did help make a difference in the black community. Yeah, I think I made my point about the differences between the two parties. All right, I'm going to say peace and blessings to y'all. I hope this, I mean, a lot of people have said this hangout has been a little choppy and stuff. I'm going to listen to the playback. If it's bad, I'm going to have to delete it. But I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Peace and blessings to each and every one of you.